saya ucapkan tahniah dan penghargaan atas inisiatif atau ikhtiar IKIM dan WADA untuk menyemarakkan kefahaman wacana. Wacana yang agak segar, membicarakan soal maqasid dan juga madani. Kebetulan pagi tadi saya luncurkan satu projek besar, tidak raksasa, tapi sangat bermakna untuk menterjemahkan falsafah dan konsep negara madani dalam suatu kota di pinggir Putrajaya. Ini namakan kota madani. Kerana menterjemahkan konsep itu satu cabaran yang besar. Bagaimana isu kemampanan diartikan bukan sahaja sustainability dari sudut ketahanan dan ekonomi, tetapi pemberkasaan rakyat yang berteraskan nilai dan etika. Bagaimana isu ihsan dan rahmah itu serta daya cipta dan inovasi dapat dimaknai bagi rakyat yang hidup. Bagaimana isu perumahan rakyat, terutama pejabat awam, ditangani. Bagaimana dapat kita kurangkan kos anak-anak dengan sekolah dan tadika dan hospital dan kemudahan asas itu dalam kompleks yang sama, sebuah kota. Itu Alhamdulillah dapat kita luncurkan walaupun dikendalikan oleh Perbadanan Putrajaya, tetapi dalam belanja akhirnya 4 bilion ringgit, tetapi ia agak menyenangkan kerana ia ada usaha menterjemahkan konsep ini. Now, Excellencies and friends, I'm delighted to see not only friends from Malaysia, but representatives from overseas. Some of them are old friends, although they're still young. And I'm, of course, very much encouraged that we use this as an important forum for reasoned discourse. In this age of Islamofobia, where Islam is treated with such prejudice, we need to have this courage or conviction to engage in a reasoned discourse, to present our case, not only to respond or to counter the offensives, but to state our position. Why can Muslims, who happen to be majority in ASEAN, be able to embrace these values and ethical principles, at the same time appreciate and understand the true spirit of lita'arafu, to engage with others, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus in our region, without being unnecessarily apologetic or defensive. We have a great civilization and tradition, and relatively very peaceful. There was initially some problems in Myanmar, which we are trying to engage. Unfortunately, there's certain incident now between the borders of Cambodia and Thailand, which is fortunately being contained, although it's still tense. But otherwise, ASEAN is relatively the most peaceful region in the world and the most dynamic and vibrant economically. Now, we have therefore to promote these values. What is so significant or unique within our understanding of Islam and Islamic civilization in this region? Peace, yes. Development, yes. Everybody talks about development. That's why in the Asian Renaissance, thank you so for making reference to that, we talk about economic empowerment. Economy remains the fundamentals. We can't organize a reasonable conference without some financial support. So we should not relegate the importance of the economy. Do whatever is necessary to promote growth and development, to attract domestic investments and foreign direct investments. But that is not the entirety economic empowerment is for a cause. That is why we talk about cultural empowerment. When we talk about Kuala Lumpur, one of my first tasks is to make sure that it is not recognized by the huge mega buildings, the towers, and the impressive buildings. And I always remind them of what Mark Twain used to refer to when he first went to Washington, D.C. Impressive buildings, modern technology, gigantic, impressive, but he made a reference to what is now popularly termed as culturally barren. Gersang budayanya. But to us, of course, it's not just culture, it's values, it's ethics, it's akhlaq, it's the shakhsiyah, the character, which it should differentiate our understanding of what is development, what is sustainability, and why we should be proud of Kuala Lumpur, not because of these major impressive towers, but also the small stalls and food stalls and what we call here warung, restaurant kecil, that makes a difference. How many percent goes to these impressive hotels? 15, 20%? How many, in terms of population, make use of these stalls and small restaurants? 80%. But why is these 80% being neglected? Dirty, unimpressive building, no basic facilities and amenities. Is something wrong with our understanding about values and ethics and what is justice? So that's why I said to the authorities here, I said, we have to do more to make sure that every single store, food store, given the basic amenities. That is, to my mind, the criteria of empowering our people. And of course, in terms of other facilities as well. We talk about education, one of the first things. That is why Madani as a concept should instill that spirit and awareness about values of ethics and compassion, rahmah and ihsan, and a balanced community, ummatan wasata, about the need for islah, but for whom? It's for the common people. So I think, don't worry, I'm not going to read the text. So you see, how do you translate these impressive concepts and philosophical constructs in a society that is fragmented and polarized, in a systemic a society that have faced the issue of systemic corruption, where everyone, once he is given the authority or the privilege to lead, he must be corrupt. He must amass wealth. Otherwise, he's not known to be too smart. So this changing mindset is a major problem. And we are not battling in a vacuum. I have huge problems here with some of our educated elites. Some, of course, calls for immediate reform and change. Okay? But I also detect some gross inconsistencies when it comes to anti-corruption drive. It's just against one man. Those who have squandered billions are being ignored. And nobody mentioned them. I find it odd, utterly hypocritical to be talking about corruption and confining to one person, the former Prime Minister, for example, and ignoring the fact that billions are being squandered. And when the Anti-Corruption Commission went after them, not one word, not one sound, one support. What is wrong with our system? we should be able to then express. I'm not saying that you should be drawn to partisan politics. We should be drawn to ethics and values. Just because these billionaires support you, or support your organization, or support your party, or support your civil society, does not mean that you should erase or ignore the corrupt practices of the past. I mean, that's just one example. So when you talk about Madani, you're talking about the whole society and nation. This morning we're launching this Kota Madani. I mean, reference, of course, Ibn Khaldun's thesis. Abdurrahman Ibn Khaldun in the Muqaddimah, where he talked about Amran Baydawi, and then focusing with this Asabiya, esprit de corps, and center on the city, with idealism, with values, with principles, with ethics. We want to achieve unity. With this unity, we want to propel growth. For the growth, we use it for the benefit of our society and mankind. We are grounded with idealism, therefore strong values and ethics. But 1, 2, third generation pass, then you find this degeneration of ethical values and principles. We have lost that idealism. Those in power would want to amass wealth. Those elites, for whatever reasons, either support on side or obsessed with their particular values or interests, disregarding the totality and the complexity of a problem. So corruption became endemic and later systemic. Beginning, of course, with the leadership. And from this Omran Hadari, a city that propelled and became a great civilization, then became more decadent. He studied these North African societies, and of course very detailed analysis that influenced modern sociology. Right. So our concern, particularly for younger generation, is how do you then protect this? How do you then stop this trend towards decadence by instilling values and calling for reform and islah, mastata'tum, change as much as you can possibly do. And that is the only possibility to my mind. Do we have a choice? We don't have a choice. Malaysia, as many of the other countries in ASEAN, has enormous potential. Yes, we have problems. It's a very multiracial society. Islam is formed the majority, 60%. Islam is the religion of the federation, but it is a multiracial, multireligious society. There are calls from every racial groups demanding to be protected, and everybody will express some form of dissatisfaction. Probably that's the beauty of the society. And then there'll be some demands from provinces, states. Well, we have to accept that and work and navigate wisely. Can we satisfy all at the same time? No. But we have to agree on one thing. This country, as most of our societies, do we then, can we just accept the fact that only through positive reform we can not only save the society and the nation, but to propel the economy through growth and good governance? Well, the answer is, of course, unequivocally yes, in the positive. But how do we then navigate? As I said, one example is the corruption. One person gets a DNAA, and the Prime Minister is condemned by one group. Then the next week, the other person gets DNAA, and the Prime Minister is also condemned. But these guys talk about judicial independence. So there's a apparent contradiction. What do you want? You want me to be a dictator by asking the judges to adjudicate based on your personal views, or leave it to the courts to decide? Some may agree, some may disagree. Yeah, some I utterly disagree. But then that's what independence of judiciary is about. Right? That the executive has its powers, but also its limits because of the principle of the separation of powers, which is not necessarily Western or just Montesquieu. Montesquieu probably articulated and elaborated a bit more, partly because our sheer ignorance of our past and our turath, our legacy. You find lots of stories about the experience of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu an, about the shield and how he had to face an independent court proceedings. So we will have to then proceed in this framework to ensure that first a better understanding of Islamic precepts. As I said in the beginning, in the introduction, in the days of Islamophobia, our task is partly just to respond. There was one group against hijab in this country. There's one group that discriminates against Muslims. There's one country who says, no, Muslims should be not be allowed to this university. We have huge problems. But do we just respond? Do we just counter? Or we then, within our limits, within our societies, Malaysia, ASEAN, for example, promote this. And nothing stopping us from getting the Muslims together, having in-depth study and understanding, because we too, in the internal dynamics among Muslim societies, face problems. There are various itijahat trends. There are various, in our history, there are trends towards fanaticism and extremism. There's been violence promoted in the name of Islam. There's been lots of fitnah and in the name of Islam. So we must also accept the fact that reform to it within Muslim societies. Then we accept the fact that of the complexity and plurality of our societies by engaging. You want this country to proceed ethically and with the right values, and particularly because of the Islamic concept and framework, but you do nothing to interact with the rest. You do nothing to interact with the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Buddhists and the Christians. But it's a flaw. So you have to get that and understand. Now, in order to engage well with the Hindus and the Confucianists and the Christians, you just don't go and lecture to them. You have also to listen to them. That's what engagement and dialogue is all about. When I organize a major international conference, they brought about some great Muslim scholars, and Tu Wei Ming from Harvard at that time, now he's in Beijing, a very known scholar of Neo-Confucianism. Well, I was criticized. Why do you get Muslims to understand Confucianism? I said, my dear, how do we then get them to understand Islam? If you refuse to listen to them, you can disagree by all means. But you can also find areas or concepts or values that we share. Let us rejoice, embrace the values that we share. because we cannot have an effective, meaningful society without understanding and dialogue. How many non-Muslims here, Chinese, Hindus, have some basic understanding of Islam? Not many. Yeah. So, for example, in my public lectures now, we're talking about Ramadan. I tell them. And I remember I was some sheikhs from some parties attacked me because how can Anwar equate fasting with other religions who also fast? See, they take, for example, a portion and interpret. I'm referring to kutiba ala allazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun in that ayat. I just see that everybody fast, and that's why kutiba Quran made reference to those before you. Oh, they say, but those before you only the Christians and the Jews. Well, I would just say those before you from other religious denominations also fast. And then I qualified. But to Muslims, the intention is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. It is better to say that. No, let us appreciate Sawm, fasting. Muslims do. And earlier on, the Quran recognized that there was this practice before you. So just say that. But for us Muslims, the intention is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Is piety, it is in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for discipline, for spiritual upliftment. Yes. But the others, well, they ask the others. But you know, I was condemned. See, Anwar? He is liberal, plural, because he quit fasting with other religions. My word. You know, they should then understand. How do you get the Chinese, the Indians to appreciate fasting? You see, we fast, but you fast wrongly. You know, you are all stupid fellas. And I mean, that's not dialogue. You see? That's anger. That is preaching hatred and fanaticism. Do we lose? No. I think my task is, of course, to get them to understand and appreciate. And so we take up the opportunity to explain. Now, to me, why do I go to expand this sort of arguments? Because I want to understand that the Madani concept and framework, of course, you can read about it, but more important is that how do you translate this? How do you translate this into practical purposes and action? And may Allah help us. And I thank all the foreign participants for joining us. And since we have excellent relations in ASEAN, all these prime ministers and king and presidents are, on call all the time, they make use of this to forge understanding, to strengthen our bond. We should not learn from the others, from the hatred and other regions. We should show cause. The ASEAN can be unique because we have not lost our sanity. Whilst we take pride in our belief, we want our country to succeed economically, but we want to be culturally vibrant and ethically grounded in proper values and faith. Jadi saya ucap terima kasih sekali lagi dengar kuliah saya ni. Tak apa dia tulis saya tadi. Ya, semalam saya tengok teks tapi tak jadi baca. Ya okey lah ya. Tapi kalau nak edar teks boleh. Tapi saya harap rakan dapat jayakan program ini. Tapi melalui program, tadi Mak Azam sebut, mungkin tahun depan kita buat di Manila ke, di Petani ke, di Jakarta. Esok saya ke Jakarta, saya akan bincang dengan Pak Prabowo Subianto, Presiden, sebari sokongan usaha ini, supaya kalau boleh Jakarta pula Anjur, dan kita buka perbincangan yang lebih luas. Ingat, memahami bukan saja minta mereka faham, kita juga harus tunjuk kesediaan kita untuk mendengar dan menilai supaya kita dapat bangkit kesedaran baru ini seperti mana yang diidamkan oleh Ibn Khaldun, Umran Hadari. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.